All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It's the Ref Room with Scott and Brad. We are here live from Chicago, and we are joined today by a very special guest. We have a gentleman that has made it about as far as you can go as a referee, and he has done 5 world championships. He is a legend. Steve Patafie joins us today, and of course, Brad, and we're going to get to it right after this. We got a lot to talk about. All right, Brad Baumrock joins us right here. What's going on, Brad? How are you?
Pretty good, Scott. Doing well. Just on a personal note, I want to send a shout out to my buddy Steve out in Chattanooga. The Chattanooga Hockey Club finally got their new roller hockey floor. They've been getting donations and doing it for about 3.5 years now. They just started putting it in. It's about 3/4 of the way in. So congratulations to them on a personal note.
Awesome.
But other than that, I'm doing well.
Good, man. We got hockey. We got some hockey to talk about. We got, I see some games have posted here in Chicago. I see some teams are going to some tournaments, so we got a lot of stuff going on. We're going to talk about that stuff today, but I really want to get to this right away because we have a really special guest today. I know you know him very well, Brad, and it's Steve Patafie. Steve joins us. He's coming to us from Texas today, all the way down in San Antonio, but I had the pleasure of meeting Steve at a district seminar a few years back, and we've stayed in touch. I learned so much from him about the mental side of being a referee and dealing with coaches and all kinds of stuff that I really wanted to, I begged him basically to come on the show and talk about some of that stuff because I think it's stuff that's so valuable for all of us. And again, you know, I still quoted a lot of the stuff that he taught us. So I figured let's go right to the man, and that's Steve. Steve, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Scott. And so, you know, you didn't have to beg too hard. I'm down in Texas, San Antonio to be exact. So, little hockey community here, but I don't get the opportunity to talk about hockey enough. So I appreciate you and Brad having me on today. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, you worked, 5 world championships, is that correct?
I was, fortunate enough to work 5 world championships. Yep, a couple world juniors. So had a fun international career, and and just sort of plugged away in the minors for a few years and everything else. So
yeah. I mean, when I met you up in Michigan, and I think you were living in Arkansas at the time, if I'm not mistaken. And it's like, how do you work hockey from Arkansas?
It's you know what, I've been blessed, and it's funny because when I first got, I don't even remember where I was living at the time. So when I first got into, I'll just say, taking officiating a little bit more seriously. I was in 8 states in 5 years. I think I started my career. After I left college, my first year officiating full-time, I was based in the Detroit area. Then I was in Billings, Montana, Minnesota, spent some time in Chicago, did get sent down to Texas for 6 months, Columbia, South Carolina, then Atlanta, and was fortunate at that point in time that was able to work some games out of Arkansas. So I ended up getting a real job at the quote unquote at the end of my career, and kind of tried to balance the two, and was able to do it from Arkansas. And then now we're down in San Antonio. We've been here for about 3 months. So,
and you worked the ECHL, right? For how long?
So I was fortunate enough to work the ECHL for maybe 7 or 8 years, and then at the end of my career, I was working the American League for 4 or 5, and
nice.
There was some as I was going out to pasture, I guess you would say, I went and worked some NCAA for a few years too. So kind of at the end, so worked in that NCHC division, and then the Atlantic Hockey League up in the Northeast. So so and was like I said, very fortunate that kind of got on with some leagues and some conferences that were very accommodating and took care of me, even though I was living, maybe not in a hockey hotbed at that point in time of Northwest Arkansas. So great hockey community, but just just wasn't a lot there when it comes down to it. So,
yeah, we've seen a couple teams come from that southeast that are kind of like all-star teams that are put together, and they've got some very good players. It makes you wonder how they pull it off because they're all traveling just to come together to play, and they do a great job. They're very impressive.
Yeah, I'll say this from, my short stint in the South where I've been down here, there really has been some incredible programs around Atlanta, in Florida, even just the Dallas area that they're really just going all in. And yeah, it's amazing to see how, and good to see how hockey's really grown into just such a national sport for everybody down here. And I'll even say this with the Northwest Arkansas community. No, they might not be competing with, some of the AAA programs that are in some of the other hotbeds, but man, they had a great association. They were fielding teams. There's 2 rinks in the entire state in Arkansas. There was one in Little Rock, and there was one up in Northwest Arkansas. And I mean, just to see that they were able to field teams at all age levels, really able to build things out, get a good hockey community there. It was a lot of fun. It was tight knit. So
Little Rock's pretty cool. I mean, I actually did a show in, I think it's Hendricks College or something. Is that in?
Okay.
Yeah, it's the middle of nowhere. It's like chicken at the gas station until you get there, and then all of a sudden it's a really cool town. So pretty neat.
Arkansas was, we were there for about 5 years. It was a fun little stay, nice little journey.
Well, one of the reasons, I'm sorry, Brad, go ahead.
No, you're good. The good thing is, to hear that it's growing in other communities, Steve, we're lucky enough here in Chicago that it's so big that, we have any growth here. We're like, oh, they really needed another rink over there. Like, that's our growth. Like, we're not looking at, we're finally getting our first AAA program, or, it's our AA team's going to travel into Illinois and play for the year. And, we've seen teams do that for quite a few years, and some of them work out really good, and some of them not so good. So it's cool to hear that it's getting bigger everywhere, not just in our local area.
Yeah, and you know what? Let me just say this too. It's been an interesting for me. I would just say on my route. So I grew up in Eastern Canada, where it's kind of the exact same way of like you just mentioned, everybody plays, right? Then we moved a lot. I grew up in a hockey family. So my old man, he's still in the game. He was with the Flames for about 30 years as a medical trainer,
Nice.
and then. My mother worked for Hockey Canada while I was growing up, so I was not going to be a baseball player. I grew up in a hockey family, and we ended up moving to Clinton, New York while I was in high school. And if that name sounds familiar, it was they won that Kraft Hockeyville a couple years ago. And I'll just say it's what I moved a lot, but I consider Clinton home, and they deserved it. I mean, it's just an awesome, awesome hockey community there. And then I moved to the South. And I'm in Arkansas and stuff like that. And it kind of just put things into perspective and stuff like that, just to see how different things are, right? Because I think sometimes you always just look at the competitive side and how do you grow the competitive teams and what can you do? But when you really get down to that grassroots level and you start looking at things, it was, it was just different, and it was a lot of fun. And I'll even just say one of the things that I was always passionate about was, how do you get more kids? How do you get more individuals into officiating? At the end of the day, officiating molded who I am, right? My personality and everything about me. And, it's just, how do you expose more kids to that, right? And get them involved and get them started. Well, I moved to Arkansas. You got, one team at each level. They have problems getting teams to come down to play them. They do a lot of travel to go out and play just to keep things going. And so all of a sudden you can go and recruit kids, they get excited, but then there's no games for them to officiate, right? So it's kind of, it turns into a whole balancing act when it comes to that. So a lot of things there really got put into perspective for me on just, hey, the grassroots, what else is out there? And it's not just driving competitive programs. How do you get people into college? How do you get people into, the professional ranks? So,
I'm glad you brought up how, officiating's molded you as a person, because we were talking about it before we got on. I mean, it's probably been 12, 13 years that you and me have seen each other face to face.
Yeah.
And, I've been in Chicago, I've lived here the whole time, and you've moved around like 6 or 7 times. But officiating gets into you and it affects everything in your life. I mean, your family then ends up starting to meet your officiating friends, and you have these official friends, and then you have your other friends, and I don't mean official friends like
Yeah.
they're official, but you have referee friends that you see 9 months out of the year. And then once you guys get away from each other, you might shoot some texts or some emails or talk every once in a while.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden the hockey season comes again, and boom, it's like nothing changed. It's like your best friend forever.
Well, yeah, and if you really think of it, and you're right, and I think a lot of it has to do, for lack of a better term, you're going to battle together, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if you're doing a youth game, if you're doing a professional game, you're getting thrown into, at times, an uncomfortable, hostile environment where there's only 2, 3, 4 of you on the ice that are working together trying to accomplish a common goal, right? And it's how do you get through this hockey game? And you're not working with the same guys every single night. So yeah, there's a lot to be said, I think, as you just sort of go through the season, you work with the different guys, you're all out there together, and you're just battling away, because as we all know, it's a grind. It's not easy, no matter what the level is. It's not easy, everything that an official has to go through. So yeah, that's I think what does just cause, just the brotherhood, we'll say, right? So but yeah.
Yeah, we want to talk about that today too, because you are in battle and you've got 3 or 4 guys that you're working with, and there are some pretty intense games out there where there's a lot of emotion. We get a couple really good high school teams or a couple good AAA teams, and it's all on the line for these guys. And you're in an environment that definitely requires a lot of focus and attention, and the emotions are running so high. I'd like to talk about that today. And how you deal with the teams and the coaches, and kind of the mental aspect of being a good referee.
Yeah.
Hey Scott, let me interject something. There was a little part that I didn't think of until this morning. I'd rather dive into real quick on how do you get yourself ready, and how do you control yourself out on the ice, and how does that impact the game first, before we deal with how do we deal with some coaches and players and calling of penalties and possibly fans in the parking lot and all that stuff.
Right.
But, I think probably the most important part of an entire hockey game is one of the only parts we can control is ourselves. I mean, everything else we just manage.
You know what? I have and I'm going to give him a plug. I was so lucky. I was fortunate to live with a guy by the name of Adam Hendren. He lives in Vegas now. He was my roommate in Billings, Montana. So I had him my second season. And he used to say something like, hey, control the things that you can control. At the end of the day, there is so much that can happen in a hockey game that we have no control over, right? So he used to say things like, if you're not in shape, that's on you, right? You have all summer to be in shape. I will tell you, when I was working, I knew if I remember correctly, it's been a few years, I think it was like 178 pages in the ECHL rulebook. I could tell you every single word. I was a nerd when it came to it, because at the end of the day, I was accountable for that, right? Yeah. So it's the guys that go into the season, and I know, look, when we're talking, some guys might only do 12 and under, might only do Bantam, but still, at the end of the day, if you're not physically in the shape that you need to be to handle the games that you're getting assigned, what's your excuse? If you don't know the rules that are in the rule book, or you don't know your basic manual, the red book there that was sent out by USA Hockey, what's your excuse? And I don't get it. And I don't know if your excuse can be, hey, I've been doing this for 20 years and I understand the game of hockey because I played at a good high school. That's not how it works. So control all those things that you can control. Brad, it's funny too, because I went through a lot of different phases, I would say, in my career of, what was going to be my pregame routine? Do I show up and go for a run and get a sweat? Some guys, went through a phase of jumping rope, and went through a phase of reading the rule book and doing all these different things. The one thing that I ended up doing, and got great advice actually from my national camp instructor, he said your best routine in his eyes was to have no routine. And he goes, because if anything gets thrown off, how does that affect your game? And he gave me a story about how he was working the Olympics in Salt Lake City. They got stuck in some traffic. They ended up showing up to the rink about 10 minutes before the game. All he had to do was get a cup of coffee. How he prepared for a game, his kind of, button that he had to push was just have a cup of coffee. All these other guys, he said, had to run and stretch and do 15 leg kicks and do, some of these different things. Now all of a sudden it's 10 minutes before the game, their game's already thrown off, and he was ready to go. So for me, all I just had to do was make sure that I put my left skate on before my right, and then I was good to go. Because at the end of the day, look, and it's going to be different for everybody, right? And I think having a routine or having something that kind of puts you in that mindset to know, okay, it's time to go out for a game and it's time to go, is going to be different for everybody. But I just took the advice because, look, there were times that I was traveling in and there was an accident on the highway or something happened. You just show up at the rink a lot later than you expected to. Or you get a call, there's some guys that might get a call last minute because somebody's partner didn't show up, right? And now they're running to the rink. So is your game already thrown off because you didn't get the opportunity to go to the bathroom 22 minutes before the game starts, or you didn't get the opportunity to jump your rope or do whatever it is? And I'm not knocking the guys that do it, but it was one of those, when this individual told this to me, it just hit home and it kind of sat. So my thing was, you put the left skate on before the right. And then I also had a couple other little tricks that I had to do in case things started to get a little out of control. I made sure that I had almost different triggers for myself. There was more of a reset, because at times things are going to start to get away from you, maybe a little bit more than you would like or you would ever want. So one of my things, just because it wasn't obvious, I would just pull on my pant leg. So if I pulled on my right pant leg, it was just a trigger in my head to say, hey, it's basically time to reset. An individual at training camp from the National Hockey League said he used to just take a deep breath through his nose. There were different triggers that I think a lot of guys would use. One would tap his right skate twice. We used to talk about it. And for me, it would just be as simple, because there's going to be times where things do get away. It is what it is, right? It's a tough game where we have to react quickly. But yeah, I'd pull on my pant leg. And kind of a long-winded answer, Brad, maybe to your question. So at the end of the day, it was always control what you can control. And then as far as I think having a pregame routine is somewhat important, but at the same time, how can you limit it so that it never gets affected? So,
well, when you're working in a really tough game and it's a really physical game and, there's a lot of emotion there, tell me a little bit about your mindset in terms of watching those hits, watching what's going on. The place is just ready to erupt. Put yourself in that situation and walk us through that. Give us some advice on how to deal with that when you're in a really competitive game and there's a lot going on and the emotions are that high.
Sure. It's funny because I'm getting chills even thinking about it. So one of the things I used to always say, I'll say kind of as I became a little bit more seasoned, was treat the first period as if it's third period or overtime of a playoff game. And what I would mean by that, and vice versa, right? Treat the third period and overtime like you would in the first period. So I think what happens is when a lot of people hear that, it basically sounds like, okay, let everything go, and that's not the case. What I'm basically trying to say is, if you're bold enough to call something in the first period, then you better be bold enough to call that exact same hook or that exact same trip in third and overtime. You set the standard. And to go back to your question, if you can set that mentality right away when you're out there for that opening face-off, or you're out there for the second period face-off, as I reflected at different times throughout my career, second period was my worst period. It's easy to get pumped up for the beginning of the game. And if your second period is bad, it's easy to get pumped up to go out there and clean up everything you just did in the third, in the second for the third. But second period, but if I would go out there in the second period and treat it as if it was the third or overtime, and I was just that focused and that into it, that's all that needed to be done. Everything else around you kind of just turns into white noise. So, but.
Well, how did you get to where you ended up? I mean, you start out as a referee, doing mites and squirts and peewees, and the next thing you know, you're traveling all over the world. You're moving up and doing all these big games. And how did the things change? Working with the coaches at a different talent level when you've got guys that much is expected from them and much is expected from you as well.
So let me say this. At the end of the day, I'll be the first to admit I caught lightning in a bottle. I am lucky. There are plenty of other guys that probably could have went on and have worked hard and did some of the stuff that I did. I blessed, fortunate, caught lightning in a bottle. And you're right, because my career started the exact same way as everybody else. I started reffing at 12, doing the squirts and the peewees. And if I really reflect back, I think I was just very fortunate. When I was in Clinton, going back, 20 years ago now, there was a gentleman by the name of Mike Verminski, Ed Bowling. They used to come to the rinks and watch and supervise. They were the local USA hockey supervisors. They weren't doing games. Their kids weren't doing games, but they would come and they would do a supervision. Now I realize how much that is to take time out of your day to go and do that. Anybody that's listening, please, if you can go to the rink once a month to watch a kid skate and give them some feedback, it means a lot, and where I'm going is they went and they did, they were nice enough to do some supervisions and give feedback. And I always listened every time they said and just made the recommendations. And at the end of the day, the reality is you just have to conquer the league that you're in. So if you're somebody out there and you're getting Pee Wee games and you want to get Bantam games, or you're getting high school games and you want to do college, you got to be the best one in your league. And the only way to be the best one in your league is to continue to work harder and don't look. It's not about calling good hooks and good trips, because Brad, you and I will go out there and we'd ref a game, and at the end of the day, I'm not going to call better hooks than you. Right? It's understanding everything else that comes with it and the mentality. And I think a lot of it is just understanding the game of hockey and what's right. And just remembering everything in the rule book, it's guidelines, right? So if you understand the game of hockey and you have scrums, and at the end of the day, your decisions that you're making are more for what's best for the game and not so much what's so black and white in the rule book, it's going to get you a lot more respect, and people are going to understand it, because there's ways with the way the rule book is written and everything else, you can get yourself into so many pickles, or if you just go with what you see. And I mean, a perfect example is, a red forward goes and crashes the net on a white goaltender, and it starts a melee, and then all of a sudden you try to grab the 3 or 4 guys that you just see, and you look up at the scoreboard and somehow white is down when red started the entire thing. Like, does that make sense? Why not just work backwards and you put in the one red guy? And this is just very simple, obviously, but, put in the one red guy and have him down for 2 minutes. And if the coach says, what about A, B, C, and D? It's just like, hey, no, your guy started it. At the end of the day, what's right for the game is it should be 5-on-4. So let's just move on. Like, we don't need to do every black and white thing. And
see, that's just brilliant. I just love it.
Yeah, it's just doing it's just understanding the game of hockey and doing what's right for the game, and working backwards a lot, I think, is just the simple version. So
doing what's right for the game, I just want to clarify that. And please. I think everybody understands officiating and understands the sport of, everybody's trying to score and there's some infractions. Mm-hmm. But by doing right on the game, you mean correcting the game in order so that it gets played as fairly as possible and is within the rules as much as possible for that particular game, correct? For that game, and just what's right. And look, at the end of the day, there were rules out there that I did not like, but at the end of the day, like, that's not up to me. Like, I was getting paid and being asked to enforce those rules. And so if somebody puts out a rule or puts out a standard that you don't like, you don't have to like it, but at the end of the day, it's what's right. And I think where some of it gets confusing too is you need to look at things holistically. So there would be times, I was sitting with an individual the other night, and it's like, oh, how do you call that with, a few minutes left in the third period in this 1-goal game? How do you call that? Well, how is it fair to the other team if you don't call it?
You don't have to like the rule. It's a penalty, and I mean, it's one of those, so, white trips red, but there's a couple minutes down and white's down a goal. Is it what's right for the game to not penalize white because they're down a goal and they're competing? No, you broke the rules. It's just that simple. And, so, yeah. But
how important is it to find what I would call your own game? Because Steve, you and me, we can go out there and referee the same game 400 times and split it. You referee it 200 times and I referee it 200 times. How important is it, because you and me don't call the same game no matter what we do. And I don't think, yourself from, Monday to Tuesday calls the exact same game. How important is it to settle into your game and play where you want to play?
So, very tough question. I think at the end of the day, there needs to be consistency with everything. So I think each individual needs to work to be consistent, throughout the season. And you're right. I mean, it's obviously the most difficult thing that you can do, but then there also needs to be, and I truly believe this because I've seen it, there needs to be the consistency within the group. I don't know, what's it been, 15 years now? It's not even the new standard, but 15 years now, I think it's been when they put in the standard of play of basically saying, hey, hooking and holding throughout the neutral zone, we're taking that all out, right? And look, whether you liked it at the time or didn't like it, almost didn't matter. There was a group of us that bought in, and then there was another group that basically said, no, I'm going to go out there and I'm still going to get my no-hitters, and at the end of the day, I can manage a hockey game, And when there wasn't that consistency, it made it very difficult, and the reality of it is the group that bought in, whether they liked it or not, was the ones that kept moving on, and the group that didn't buy in left. And I think so at the end of the day, look, there's always going to be some variance, but I think each association and group, and USA Hockey's done their best to put out this, standard of play for everybody. The consistency needs to be there for the players, and it needs to be there, just for everybody as these teams travel and stuff like that. So, yeah, there might be some people that see the same thing. One doesn't feel it's a penalty, one does. I do think at times when that happens, and it's going to happen throughout the season, but there almost needs to be a conversation. Sometimes there won't ever be common ground. This guy might not ever say, hey, you know what, yes, you're right, and vice versa. But at least if there's a conversation, it kind of helps keep things as close as possible. Because I think, at the end of the day, there are those guys that have the MO that can go out and not call anything, and there's the guys that have the MO that call everything. But how do you narrow that down? It's only what's right for the team. So.
Well, you've got to strike a balance with your partner. I mean, you guys got to be on the same page to some degree here. I mean, it's crazy if you got one guy calling 20 penalties and the other guy's sitting there going,
So, it's funny because I also went through the phase of when everything used to be in the 3 official system, and then we went to a 4. That was a tough transition for me because, you're used to having full control. And this was a penalty, this wasn't, and, everything else. And then all of a sudden you got somebody else who could be, 60 feet away putting their arm up and calling something. And there was a little bit of a gut check on my end. And I struggled with that when that first came out, of trying to say, okay, hey, now we're splitting. What I realized was best for me was, and I'll tell you this, anybody that does international hockey can say the exact same thing, because the standard that's been put in place in North America is a little bit different than, some of the European countries and stuff like that. They're still not quite as close as where I think everybody would like it. So now all of a sudden I might be going out and I'm doing a game with, somebody from a different country that has a completely different standard. So that's where it took a bit of a gut check. I'll be honest, what worked for me was it's a team environment, but if I either thought it was a penalty or I didn't, and I trusted my partner enough, no matter how young, how old, if they believed it was a penalty, it's on them. They called the penalty. They have the backbone to call the penalty. It's not easy to put your arm up, right? And vice versa. So if they believed it was a penalty, then they were bold enough to call a penalty. They can stick up for the penalty, and it is what it is. That cannot be a blow to my ego. I cannot get upset at them for calling the penalty. At the end of the day, It is what it is, and vice versa. I would, because it got to the point where all of a sudden I was letting some things go because it was in front of my partner. And I just realized games were starting to get a little bit out of control from the way that I liked it. So it was the same thing where, I'd put my arm up if I saw something and saw it was a penalty. There were some guys that would get upset, but at the end of the day, I told them, look, if I see it and it's a penalty, I apologize if it's right in front of you. It's a penalty. So I'm bold enough to put my arm up. I'm bold enough to tell you. I'm bold enough to tell that coach. I'm bold enough to tell whatever it is. Like, I'm getting paid to do a job, and that job doesn't mean if I see something in front of you, I turn a blind eye because it's a blow to your ego. We get through it all together. And you just have, I think sometimes healthy conversations help with that. And it's not saying, hey, railroad, partners or anything like that. It's, work together. But at the end of the day, you have to realize you need to still work your own game. So
sometimes you have a penalty. I mean, it may be in front of you. You can't see it because it's so close to you. You don't have a field of view. So, I mean, you definitely have an advantage with that other set of eyes out there. And that's when your partner needs to step up and raise his hand.
There have been quite a few times where I could probably count more times where I've been helped out and couldn't have been more thankful that a partner raised his hand and called something that was more in my line of sight or probably should have been mine than me getting upset because they did it. So a lot of times, it's nice to have somebody that'll bail you out. And I'd almost get more upset if somebody saw something, didn't call it, because they were worried about stepping on my toes. So,
and sometimes that's a more serious penalty, and it is so close to you. It's a head contact or something that you just don't have the angle to see. So, I mean, it's
absolutely, you're absolutely right. Yep.
So check your ego at the door, and then you still got to kind of buy into what your partner's calling, even if you don't exactly agree with it. But you can't lose support to them on the ice.
100%.
You guys can discuss it later, right?
Yep.
Just to recap?
Yeah,
okay.
100%. Yep. Have the conversations later, and it's not throwing anybody saying they're wrong. Just have a conversation, see where everybody's coming from. But All
right, so real quickly, everybody, we do this every Wednesday. We come on at noon. We usually have a guest here. Steve Patafie is a 5-time world champion referee. Unbelievable history and career as a hockey referee. Great guy. Learned a lot from him at a district seminar a couple of years ago, and he was kind enough to join us today. Can you stay on for a few more minutes, Steve?
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to.
So we've got a lot of people that are watching. If you have some questions you want to send in, we will take some questions and comments from everybody as we continue. Before we go any further, I do want to remind all the golfers out there, I'll do this on behalf of Jack Reslowski. We have a golf outing, guys. It's time for hockey referees to get together, and we are doing that October 16th. And Brad, where are we doing that?
We're doing it at Bloomingdale Country Club.
That's correct.
At 9 a.m.
Ding, 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 winner. Yes. So if you guys haven't registered for that, reach out to Jack or reach out to one of us. We'll be happy to give you the link or whatever the case may be. We do have it up on Facebook, so you can check it out. As you know, you can watch us every week. We're here on Facebook in Ref Room. We are on YouTube at Ref Room, and we are on Twitch at Ref Room. So you can find us. The replays go up pretty close. Maybe takes 24 hours on YouTube, but check us out anyway. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't done that. And now I want to talk a couple more things with Steve, because we learned a lot about penalty shots from you, Steve.
There you go.
And put your hand up, call the penalty shot. But why don't you walk us through some of the mental side of calling a penalty shot in a big game?
Yeah, I think, the whole mental side, and it's funny because you mentioned big game, and I think it goes back and is as foolish or whatever as it may sound, but I was being serious. If you're able to treat the first period like it's the third or overtime or stuff like that, it just makes you almost think twice before, or just ensure that you're being right, whether it's a penalty shot or a major or something like that, as you're kind of, just say, being bold. To me, the penalty shot is almost the easiest thing in the world to call. I do not understand. I think too many people talk themselves out of it. There's criteria that's pretty cut and dry on what constitute a penalty shot. It's when it comes down to it, it's funny because I used to, have the conversation. I'm sure we talked about it at the district seminar. It's you call a penalty shot, it's over in about 15 seconds. Nobody scores, everybody moves on.
Yeah.
You call a penalty, it's 2 minutes, right? So I think sometimes people feel like they're calling a penalty, and the odds on a penalty shot are in the goaltender's favor.
Yep.
In most cases, right? Obviously, you're the amateur level, you might have some
Yeah.
discrepancies, but no, in most cases. So, and I think sometimes, and it goes back to knowing the game and learning, like, hey, if it's a 1-goal hockey game and the team that's up a goal has a breakaway, gets fouled from behind, why would you put the team, and it's a clear-cut penalty shot, are you doing the team any favors when you penalize them and you put them in the box for 2 minutes? Like, no, they're trying to score, and at the end of the day, and I believe in USA Hockey, they still have the option, right? It's still the coach's option, but
yes.
Yep.
But yeah, they're trying, and at the same time, I think a lot of things, one question that I would always ask myself, and I'd ask it on a major, if that wasn't a penalty shot or that wasn't a major penalty, then what is? And it's because I think sometimes people try to talk themselves out of it. And when I saw a partner that would do the same thing, maybe not call a penalty shot for some reason, just ask them, hey, if that wasn't a penalty shot, then what is? Oh, well, he got the shot off. Well, it wasn't a very good shot, so, and he could have got a lot better one off. So I think there's the criteria there. And then the biggest piece of advice that I could give if you're calling a penalty shot, do not talk to the coach until after the shot. So if the team scores, then you're going to have to be bold and basically say, hey, it hit all 5 criteria. That's what it is. At the end of the day, we can't be fouling people from behind, taking away these scoring opportunities. If the team doesn't score, there's not even a conversation,
right?
But meanwhile, I see too often if somebody actually, puts their arm up, calls the penalty shot, coach gets mad because it's not something they're used to seeing. Then they go over and they talk to the coach, and it takes 90 seconds. Then the goalie saves it, and it's like, do we even need to go through all that? It's a very simple, hey, coach, I'll talk to you as soon as the shot's over. His goalie makes a save. You can always do the flyby. Hey, we good? Do we still need to talk? Or, 9 times out of 10, he'll brush you away. He might say, oh, we need to talk about that. Hey, he made the save. Let's talk about it at the end of the period. And you kind of just keep going on. So, but yeah, that would be the biggest piece.
Well, that was something I took away from the seminar that stuck with me for years. And I really appreciated that. It was a great piece of advice.
No, good. So,
an important tip, though, is if you do say to that coach, we'll talk to you after the shot, give him the courtesy and remember that you told him that, because if you want to see him really mad, forget about him.
I have always said, here's my thing. Don't lie to anybody. Don't lie to players. Don't lie to coaches. If you say you're going to talk to them, then go talk to them. We used to, back in the day, and I can tell you lots of war stories, but there used to be some pretty good scuffles with multiple altercations going on. And, there'd be times where I would tell guys, hey, if you stop now, you won't get a penalty. You stop now, you won't get suspended. It's not fair for me. And they'd stop. Right. And it's not fair for me to tell somebody, hey, if you stop doing this, I'm not going to penalize you. And then I throw them in the box. Right. And there'd be times, well, hey, how come number 17? No, I told him if he stopped, I wouldn't give him something. And it's like, so, and it goes the same with talking to coaches. If you say, I think there's ways that you can continue to kick the can. When it comes to some things, you don't need to go and talk to a coach all the time. A lot of times coach will, want to talk. You can say, hey, let's talk at the end of the period. There's no reason to talk to the coach if there's 3 minutes left in the first or second. Just say, hey, we'll touch base at the end of the period. And then at the end of the period, you can walk off with him, try to keep him moving towards the door so that the conversation can end. Yeah. There's no reason to have him standing on the bench and you standing there with him. If he has to cross the ice to get off, just say, hey, I'll skate off with you. And cross, and it's simple things like that. If he's trying to get your attention at the end of the period because of something that might have just happened within the last 5 seconds, there's nothing wrong with it. If it's one of those games where they do the ice in between the periods, nothing wrong with saying, hey, I need to run to the restroom. I will catch you at the beginning of the period. Let him cool down, find ways to just sort of kick the can a little bit, and it's not delaying things. And
that's brilliant. I mean, absolutely brilliant. Yeah. It's a great way to keep it moving. Yeah. And you probably don't work at a level where you've got a coach that's just questioning everything. Mm-hmm. But we still see that at the amateur level. You have coaches that just like Like really, like you didn't see that was an icing. You didn't see that was an offside. You didn't see that was a check from behind. Like you're just not on the same page as anybody. And they get into a situation at that point, it's tough to go over and try to talk to them each time. So, they're probably get themselves into a situation where they're going to get a little bit more ignored.
Well, yeah, and that's fair. And I think there's, like I said, if there's ways to kick the can, it's usually when we start talking about coaches, most of the conversations or the trainings that I've seen, it's almost like they start talking once the coach is already upset. Hey, I had a coach who lost it, threw his jacket, threw a water bottle, was screaming, and then typically they end, because everybody likes these stories, with I said something sarcastic and then nobody could believe it and everything stopped, right? And I think really where the conversations need to start is at the beginning. I will tell you, before every single one of my games, I talked about I'd have to put the left skate on first. The other thing that I did do was I wrote the coach's name on my hand. It did not matter if I had seen this coach 100 times, if he'd been in the league for 10 years. His name, I would write it on my hand with a pen, and I always knew it. And even at the amateur level, it is not hard to ask a scorekeeper what's the coach's names. It's not hard to ask. I don't know if things have changed over the years, but the kids used to always love to stretch like right on that referee crease line. It's not hard to ask some kid who's doing a stretch, hey, what's your coach's name? As soon as he tells you Jim or Bill, at the beginning of the game. The other thing, it wasn't, I know different associations have different protocols, but I would always just say good luck. And usually for me, it was a point and hey, good luck or a thumbs up. And it was, Bill, good luck today. And that was it. I'm not going to, Bill, do we need to talk? And I'm going to watch head contact and I'm going to watch this and that. It was always, Bill, good luck. And then I would always use their name. It was never coach. It was always Bill, Jim, Doug, whoever it was. Always had it on my hand, so I'd remember it. And so during line change, so at the beginning of the game, you're already starting that rapport and that conversation with the name. First line change, boom, arm goes up, eye contact is made. Bill, you good? I'm good. Okay, thumbs up, and everybody moves on. So then as things start going and you're already starting that dialogue a little bit, and hey, that's a hook or that's a nice. Hey, Bill, let's keep this thing moving, and we'll talk in a few minutes. I promise you, as soon as it's the right time. Hey, was this? Bill, promise, I'll be back with you, all right? Just give me a few minutes. And then it can turn into, Bill, come on, man. I've heard about an icing. I've heard about a hooking. I've heard about this. Please, let's just keep some of this stuff to a minimum. I promise I'll give you some time, but I can't be running over here all the time. And it just sort of allows, so instead of almost the ignoring, I think sometimes that might be adding fuel to the fire. But if you're able to just start from the very first line change, eye contact, give a name. If you're 100 feet away, you don't want to be, screaming, but even just the eye contact, you good? Even a little bit of a thumbs up. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. So I think that just goes a lot farther and trying to continue to kick the can so that you can have conversations at the end. But just make sure every time you set up a conversation with the coach, there can be an end time. Because if you're talking at the end of a period, take him off. And a lot of places used to say, hey, don't talk to the coach at an end of a period, wait till the beginning of the period. But you know what? Skate off with him or do something. Don't stand there. Right? If it's the end of the game, skate so that you can get him to the door, because that means the conversation's done. If he is standing on the bench and you're standing there in front of him trying to have a conversation, who chooses when it ends? And the only way really is if it starts to get contentious is you turn around and skate, which doesn't help, because then he's got to walk another 60 feet where he's probably just going to be screaming at you. So that's just, a couple things, maybe little tidbits that I would throw out there is maybe start from the beginning of you lead the conversation, generate it, and go that way. So,
well, that is some great advice. And I got to tell you, I absolutely do that. I started because you taught me that. And whenever I have bands, I put the names of the coaches on there because guess what? The coaches all know who we are and they know our names and they like to call our names out. And it really goes a long way when you know the coach's name. It's more personal. And it was great advice. I would not have done that on my own. And if I hadn't learned that from you years ago, wouldn't work for me. So I really appreciate it. I think that is some great advice. So I hope you guys were all listening and paying attention to that about having that coach's name and knowing who you're working with. Good stuff. Brad, what do you got? We got a couple comments, actually. I just want to...
I was going to say, are there any comments?
Yeah, one of the things...
I can't see them, unfortunately.
Yeah. Steve said...
I might be afraid to know what the comments are, so just read the
Did you ever have an issue with language barrier, either with a coach or partner, as you're doing all this international hockey? It's a good question because, yes, you are working with people that are based in different languages. I think we've actually touched on this topic before because most of these teams probably do have somebody that speaks English on there or whatever the case may be. But can you please answer that, and how do you deal with it?
So it was where most of the issues came in. I spent a couple years, did a couple tours in the Asian Professional League. So some of the Asian countries were a little bit tougher. So there would be somebody maybe before the game that would help out, anything that was needed. But yeah, as you get through it, I think at the end of the day, and then some of the coaches were a little bit tough. And that's where a lot of just the nonverbal really helped, and talked about, look, I gave lots of thumbs up. I know it's not in the basic manual or USA Hockey book or anything else, but at the end of the day, if you can say, hey, we good? Oh, good. That's a very international sign, as foolish as it sounds. But
there's a couple other international signals that work very well, too.
Yeah, there are. And also in Russia, sometimes working with some of the individuals out of Russia, there were some that were great, and then some that, English just obviously wasn't anything that they had studied. But at the end of the day, and that's kind of what made it fun, you would go out and just sort of do your job and get through it. And a lot of times, I think more at the international level, there's not a lot of conversations that really need to be had. I think everybody can kind of pretty much know what's going on. And I think there's a lot of trust between coaches, players, officials, that if a penalty is called, it was called for a reason. There's also a lot of accountability that a coach might know that if a penalty is called and it wasn't right, look, at the end of the day, we either won't move on in the tournament. There'll be somebody to take care of it. So believe it or not, that was something I was always a little bit worried about, but it wasn't that big of a deal. So
nice. Brad?
I got nothing else. Fortunately, I know Steve personally, and there's not much I can really talk to him about that I don't already know the answer. So that's the hard part.
Well, did you guys work together at some point?
I think I lined for Steve a couple games. Other than that, just knew him from the program and seeing us around at different USA Hockey things and stuff like that. So
that's funny. There's been a lot of games, I think, in between, and just to remember. But no, it goes back to the whole brotherhood thing. So when it comes to Brad, we might not have skated a lot together, but at the end of the day, there's still that connection, right?
Well, what advice would you give to some of the younger officials or even some of the older officials that want to keep going and
Yeah. So one, I would say, as far as an older official, find out what drives you and what your passion is and how you can get involved, right? So I mentioned a couple names earlier, Mike Verminski, Ed Bowling, Randy Hershey, Rick Pratt. I could go on forever about guys that came to the rink without their kid being there. And now as a father, I get it. As a father, somebody that works and does everything. Yeah. I get why you don't see more people sitting in the stands helping. But, man, if you can take some time to give back on some of that knowledge that you have, please do it. Do it. And even if you're working a game, a peewee game with somebody, or take a game, if you're able to take a game that maybe is a little bit less than, or well within your comfort zone. If you're used to working midget AAA, if you could ever get out there and do a peewee game with a kid, just to help them out, if that's what'll get you to the rink, and you can find a passion behind that, oh my God, that would be great. And I think it's what more needs. As far as younger, you know what? It's enjoy the ride. It's a journey, and at the end of the day, it's not always glamorous by any means, so it could be some long road trips and stuff like that, but you'll make a lot of good friends, and everything else. But the only way to get there is going back to, like I said, my roommate Adam said when I was in Billings, is control the controllables. So don't expect anybody to give it to you. You got to show up in shape, know your rules, take care of all that stuff. Just appreciate the actual art of officiating and do what's best for the game of hockey. And really the biggest one, I probably, instead of pontificating, I probably just could have said this: be a good person. Because I will tell you this, I worked with a lot of great officials, but at the end of the day, if I was going and working with somebody new and, if I just said, hey, I got a game with Brad next week, do you know him? The first thing that was always said was either one, he was a good guy, or two, he's, not a good person. I'll just put it that way. And, then it got into, yeah, he's a good official. So just be a good person, because really that's what's going to get you farther than I think anything else, is the fact of, just being a good guy, because that's
great advice for anything. I mean,
hey, Scott, that's a perfect segue to go to that breakout.
Yeah, that is. Actually, let's do that. Do you want to stick around, Steve? Do you have to go, or you want to stick around for a couple more minutes?
I'm not getting flagged down out there.
Okay. All right, let's do Brad's breakaway here. So let me put the graphic up for Brad here real quick. It's time for Brad's breakaway, everybody. All right.
All right, so it's more of a gripe today than anything. As I was on social media yesterday, Scott made some comments on somebody's question about what's a good referee bag, which it was an e-bag that he put up there, which, if anybody's ever seen them, you could fit, a dead body in one of these things. But that's fine.
Mine isn't that big. I'm sorry. Mine, I never had a roller bag. First of all, let me just say, I was like ostracized because I didn't have a roller bag when I started refereeing. My hockey team, if you had a roller bag, you were going to be put out of the room. You were not bringing a roller bag in to play hockey with the team that I played on, okay? But as a referee, you got to have a roller bag.
Right. So anyways, going back to it with this e-bag with the wheels, and it can hold like a whole case of beer, all your equipment, your spare tire for your Jeep, all that stuff, which is fine. You guys want to bring that into the room, I don't mind. As referees, we all have been in those rooms that are no bigger than a shower stall with your two partners, or possibly three, in order to get a 4 official system in there. And
4 guys coming off the ice, by the way.
They open their e-bag and they leave it in the middle of the floor, wide open. So I have to step through it as if I'm trying to step on landmines, because the spot is so small. When you're done with your e-bag, zip it up, put it underneath the bench if you have that possibility. Don't leave your clothes everywhere. Come on, hang them up on a hanger.
This is supposed to be Brad's breakaway, not Brad's bitch session.
Well, that's what it is today. And also, if you come into a referee room and there's garbage, you bring in a water bottle or something, put it in the proper receptacle or take it with you. Don't leave it a mess, because we all know how that is. It rinks. It's overlooked. It's a small space. I get it. We're not the most important people there. I understand that as well. We're an expense. Let's keep that real. But like Steve said, be a good person. So I was thinking about this when I saw Steve's comment on Facebook last night. And no offense to anybody that has an e-bag, or I've seen a couple larger ones. No offense to you guys, but just let's clean them up. Let's keep the room a little bit more user-friendly. That's my breakaway for this
I agree.
week.
I'm going to chime in on this one, actually. I don't normally chime in on your breakaway, but I agree. And I will say, some of the younger officials, they leave their cell phone laying on the bench. They got their clothes scattered like it's in their room. They got the whole room, 40% of it anyway. There are guys that are going to be coming in after you are out on the ice. And I don't know about the rest of the guys. I zip my e-bag up. I at least close it up, because I don't want anything out accessible to anybody that happens to walk by the room, because some of these ref rooms are not locked. I probably shouldn't tell that to people, but some of them don't get locked. So it is what it is. So, I'm one of these guys. I don't bring my wallet in the rink. I leave all my valuables.
Now we know it's in your car.
That's right. That's correct. For the rest of the world, it's in my car.
The correct answer is I have no money anyways, so you don't want it.
I'm a referee. Of course I don't have any money. I'm unemployed right now. This is why I'm doing podcasts. It's just that type of year we've got going on. 2020. Can we get that the cancel culture? Can we just take away the year 2020? Can we remove it from the calendar? Yes. But yeah. So anyway, all right. Well, Steve,
That's it.
anything else you want to cover before we start to wrap things up here a little bit? I mean, we had hockey. We already have one half of the Stanley Cup final set to go. It came close last night. It could have been an all-Southern affair, but the Islanders hung in there. You're not Chicago, but we got Cubs and White Sox that could be going at it for the World Series. And guess where they'll be doing it? Down in your neighborhood in Texas, okay? So if the Cubs and the Sox were to play, they're going to go to the bubble situation, and it's going to be held down in Texas. So Chicago won't even benefit from that. They've chased everybody out even for baseball.
Every time both teams are good at the same time, something terrible happens. I mean, there was a world war the last time that both of them were really good. I mean,
is that right? Then we probably got a good chance of having both these teams in there.
No, it's depressing with baseball, especially. I'm a huge baseball fan on top of this. I'm a White Sox fan, die hard. So I know all my Cubs buddies are now booing me, which they already know anyways. And if anybody reposts that video of me with the Cubs flag, I'll kill you. So don't do that. So I lost a bet one
So
day
you're not a Cubs fan, Brad? Well, you're south. And we have a big north-south divide here. I'm on the north side. I'm in the city. But I'm a Chicago fan. I've always been a Chicago fan. So I'm gonna play neutral here.
No, there's no neutral.
One of our referees that watches, Mr. Wilkins, who's been traveling, he's been going to Minnesota to work games. So I mean, guys have had to leave the state to work, and he asked any news about hockey coming back in Illinois. So what I do know, and Brad, I don't know what you know, but let's just talk about this if you don't mind, Steve, for a brief moment, because we did lock down from hockey, but I saw some games posted for a men's league this past week that games are coming back up. So I don't know if that means they've all been given the $1 professional contract. So in Illinois, Steve, just to bring you up to speed here, the only hockey games that can take place, so you cannot scrimmage, you can do skills. So they can be skating, they could be doing skills, but they can't play anything competitive. And that even means a scrimmage amongst their teammates. Right. But there was talk from one of our guests that said that some of the leagues had considered possibly offering a professional contract to their men's league players for like $1 a year. Well, they're already professionals, you know that. Ask any of them. But that would be a way around maybe not being able to play. So I mean, I think we've had like 10. I'll call them, they're not protests because nobody looted, but we had 10 protests probably in the area trying to get hockey back. So the parents have been outside, athletes have been outside, not just for hockey, but for all sports, football, everything else. The schools, they want to come, they want to go back to school and learn versus doing online learning. So the governor came out yesterday and just squashed that altogether, that it's not going to happen. So we don't have any kind of return date. We are hearing that in other states, this has now been challenged because there's not a return date. Supposedly, you can only have like a 30-day mandate before it's unconstitutional, is what I was told. I'm certainly not a constitutional expert. Not even on TV do I play one, okay? But this has been talked about. So, we just don't have a return date right now for hockey. There's talk that they'll go over the border, probably to Indiana, maybe to Dyer or to Kenosha or whatever the case may be in Wisconsin, so that they can play some games. I know there are probably some teams traveling. I don't want to single out any teams, but there are, according to parents, teams that have gone out of state or whatever, which they're not supposed to. I guess they go under another name or whatever the case may be. So we just don't have any hockey right now, and that's the news that I have. Have you heard anything else, Brad? I mean, I saw a letter about a representative from Northbrook, a Democrat actually, that was trying to, get the governor to reconsider. But yesterday, according to the announcement, no, he's not reconsidering. So,
yeah, Scott, I know there's a lot of people on this one. So if anybody thinks that there's nobody out there looking out for all of us, you'd be shocked. There's a lot of people putting a lot of hours, a lot of good people spending their time trying to get this at least somewhat resolved. I did hear some news. A couple states in the northern hemisphere, they went back, and then we all know about Michigan because we talked about that last week. Yeah. But they're under very, very strict guidelines on how they're allowed to do stuff. I don't have all the particulars. I do know that Michigan and I believe Massachusetts players, coaches, and referees are wearing masks on the ice while they're playing. So they're allowed to play, but you're wearing a mask, and then there's all kinds of limitations on how many parents can come in. And so everybody's working for it. I think even if we get something going here in Chicago, it's going to be a slow process, except for, there's going to be a lot of games. I can guarantee you that. Yeah. But getting used to everything and getting all, every rink that you go to, you might have something new. I mean, you go to a rink and they want you to wear a mask and gloves. Well, we're going to have to be flexible as referees and players, coaches. It's going to be all in the same boat. So it's interesting. So it's tough. I don't know anything else other than I do know people are definitely going to bat for us. And there's a lot of good people going to bat for us. So I think if they can get something done, they will. But right now we're still here, unfortunately.
Yeah, doing podcasts. All right. Well, that's it. Steve, you got anything else before you go? First of all, thank you for doing this. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy day and for all the valuable information that you've shared with us for the years, because believe me, I've taken a lot of it to heart, and it's really helped me in my officiating career. So I thank you for that. I really mean that sincerely.
Hey, that's great to hear. I appreciate the kind words. And no, thank you. It was not often enough do I get to talk hockey and especially talk officiating. So I appreciated it. So thank you.
Well, great. Well, you should, put your stripes on and come back to Chicago here and do a couple games with us. Hey, I'd be happy to line for you and Brad. I mean, I got no problem with that. So
there we go. No, it would be an honor. Maybe sometime in the future. So okay. We'll see. We'll see.
Right, great.
So,
all right.
Guys.
Well, you guys have a great week. Thanks to everybody for joining us. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notifications button so you can get the notifications when we come on. We do this Wednesdays at 12 o'clock Chicago time. And the golf outing on August 16th. Don't forget to sign up for that. I always said August. Sorry.
Is it
August of 2021 or 22 when we can actually go back to doing anything, right? That is scary, by the way. I mean, they were talking about, that we won't be able to go back to any kind of normal. Melissa Gates said till 2022 on the Today Show yesterday. I mean, it's crazy. So,
all right.
Unbelievable. Well, all right, guys. Well, have a great week. We'll look forward to speaking with you again next week. And what does he say? Lots of takeaways was another comment that came. Let me just put this up here. From Karen H. Thank you for that. Lots of takeaways. Yes, Steve is the master of giving you information to take with you, so we do appreciate that. All right, guys. All right, everybody. Well, have a great week. Again, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week on the Ref Room. Don't forget, you can check us out on YouTube and Facebook. The replays will be up there in case you guys want to grab some of this information, which you definitely should. Get some of those Steve Patafie pointers and write them down in your book and keep them. All right, everybody, from the Ref Room. Scott Smokin' Sills and Brad Baumrock and our guest, Steve Patafie. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thanks.